Hello, everyone. A quick introduction to myself. My name is Prashant Kapoor. I'm a Chief Industry Specialist for Green Cities and Urban Environment at the World Bank, IFC. Lovely to have you here. I'm really excited about the panel we have and the sessions we will have today. Let me first start with giving a little bit of context before the team comes, if that's okay. Climate change is not coming. It is here, right? And it's coming first for cities more than anywhere else. You can see the impacts of climate change when it comes to where vulnerable communities are and where people live, first of all. Heat kills, floods disrupt, and poor people in these cities and communities get affected first. Adaptation is super urgent, there's no doubt about it, but not at the cost of mitigation. The reason I say that is no amount of adaptation is going to be solving anything if we don't turn the tap off on mitigation. So it's not about compromising, it's not a zero-sum game. This is about how do we get this right currently. Having said all that, cities and public officials and others need to protect our poor people now, right? Whilst cutting emissions down. So that is the real challenge here. And the solutions that we have need to be beyond a little mosquito bite here and a little bucket of cold water here. Needs to be something that is scalable, that is financeable, that we can do. That's the world I come from. And I also personally feel needs to be equitable. Unlike mitigation where you pollute and everybody gets hurt equally, adaptation hurts our poor more than anyone else. So it needs to be a little bit more sensitive in the social dimension than any other aspect here. Today, we'll be talking about moving cities from vulnerable to vibrant. That's the name of this panel. But for me, it's about how can we be practical and bold. Okay, that's really the thing that I've got for the audience here as a moderator. So let me bring Katie first to the stage. Katie? So Katie is a really interesting person. She leads this NGO called Climate Resilience for All.
We've just rebranded.
Okay.
We are now HERA.
HERA, okay. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what HERA stands for and what you do.
I'd love to. HERA stands for many things and starts with heat resilience action. And it can be HER action, it could be heat era, it can be the female form of hero. It can be the Greek goddess, the guardian of women. And it can also, can also be one other thing which I've forgotten. So many things, yes.
So I would like to, because you're focused on heat and this conversation could focus on that too. I feel like heat is a deadly thing, right? And it's here now already. And so why is there so little that is happening in that space, in the urban politics, in the policy making and the investment? Why is it sort of the forgotten child in a sense?
Well, think about the way that we look at heat on the television. Heat, you don't. I mean, think about a hurricane, a flood, a fire. It's incredibly visually dynamic. It's telegenic. So if it's silent, it's invisible. It doesn't make the news. If you took an aerial photo after a deadly heat wave one day, and then you had the heat wave, and then you took it again, you wouldn't see any difference. Unless there was a fire, you wouldn't see a difference. And so it's the stepchild of the climate hazards. We call it the orphan of the climate hazards because we've been talking about global warming for 50 plus years, and we're just beginning to understand the depth and breadth of extreme heat and its effects.
And you work in developing countries. how are they receiving this? Are they kind of any better? Because they, unlike say Europe and North America, I would imagine they're much more sensitized. They see 50 degrees and they see 45 degrees, and how are they responding to this?
What's interesting is that oftentimes when we start, all of our engagements start with a conversation with women in the community. And so often we don't start the conversation by saying, how is heat affecting your life? Because that's not the way that they're experiencing it or the way they think about it. And oftentimes people say, it's just hot. It's always been hot. And what is happening is the heat is increasing more rapidly than our brain can process how dangerous it is. And so it's not as if they're waiting for the phone to ring for someone to help with heat. And that's changing because how epic it's become. I think we had 30 million children out of school. I think, is it 300 million or 30 million? I think it might be 300 million children out of school because of heat last year, in the school year. That's just, so think about what that does. You have to go home. If your children are sent home from school, you have to go home. Or that transportation corridors, the railroad tracks, they melt. And so, you can't get to or from work. So it's becoming hugely interruptive, in addition to exponentially more impactful to vulnerable communities.
And you said you work with women particularly. Yes. Maybe give us a bit of context why and how that helps.
Yes. So women are disproportionately harmed by heat and harmed by climate in general. And maybe I would even say, because it's 4:30 in the afternoon, harmed by a lot of stuff. And the world is biased against women. And so start with the physical disproportionate impacts. Women's bodies are different from men's bodies, yes. And women's hormones are changing during a lifetime. And so that hormonal change means that your sensitivity to temperature is also changing. And so you have different sweat rates than men. So there are physical differences, and that makes women more susceptible to extreme heat, particularly when women are pregnant. That's a highly vulnerable state. But then throw in poverty, throw in making less money than men, throw in that women are responsible in developing countries for getting water, and they're not paid for that they're caring for everyone, and they're not paid for that they are cooking, and they're not paid for that. Yes. So free work. And so add heat into a hot kitchen, add drought that makes you have to go further for water. I could go on.
Actually, it reminds me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Katie, it reminds me of my early days when I was in sort of an NGO worker working in villages, not in urban areas. And there was a big earthquake, and I was helping out. And there were these kind of thatch houses, because they were temporary shelters built. And women would wake up really early in the morning and start the cooking, and we all smoked out. This is the whole smoke la chula angle. That's another thing altogether. And then, we had this whole idea of getting biogas using cow dung to kind of take this, instead of having baked cow dung like that. And there was so much protest by the men, because they felt like the rats will come back if the roof doesn't get the smoke. So there's all these kind of assumptions, and priorities are kind of quite strange that way.
And one of the things that, and I did a talk earlier today where I told a story about a woman and her experience with passing out from heat, and she had a head injury and broke her leg, and the debt that she went into. And that's another aspect of disproportionate impact, is that the high rate of interest that she is charged when she has to borrow money because heat has diminished her income. Yeah. And just one more example about women. Women are in markets, and women are more likely to be in informal work. And so in the market, what a woman is selling in fruits and vegetables and meats sometimes goes bad before she can sell it because it's so hot. And so if she doesn't have access to cold storage, then, and she doesn't have an early warning to tell her that it's going to be extra hot, then she doesn't know to moderate what she's going to buy in terms of inventory.
Right.
And she would buy less if she knew that it was.
So what, I mean, maybe you could give us some examples of what you do with in these kind of, maybe with a city in mind and with a group of people.
So one of the solutions that we are in the 4th year of testing is a parametric insurance. And raise your hand if you don't love insurance to solve climate change. Like, who doesn't love insurance, right? Woo, insurance, yes? Yes, okay, a couple, okay. It's trending. So we use a parametric insurance parametric means buy and measure. So when a particular temperature happens, a payment goes from the insurance company to the bank account of a woman, a trader in the market, and that payment is replacing her lost income from that day. Because heat is taking away her income, the insurance replaces the income. So it comes with other things. It comes with education around heat and health literacy and insurance and financial literacy so that she understands what she's buying. But the program is a shared cost for this insurance. And so in the case of this particular market trader, when she lost that income, the insurance triggered because it was 48 degrees in Ahmedabad.
So let me understand this correctly then. So in a city like Ahmedabad, you have contracts with many women there that if the temperature goes above a certain amount, then they automatically get triggered a payment for the benefits, for kind of dealing with it, is it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And maybe just for the audience, it'll be useful to understand. I'm sure they're thinking, where did the money come from? And how did you convince the insurance companies to do this?
Yes.
Right?
Well, so I could get really technical and start talking about the capital stack. We'll call it the cool capital stack for right now. But think about the biggest source of finance for climate adaptation right now is household finance. It's coming from people's homes. It's the things that we're all doing to try to protect ourselves from climate change, including market traders, including women living in poverty. They're having to pay their own protection. So the women pay a small amount of the premium for the insurance, and then we raise philanthropy because we're testing something new.
Right.
And then there's risk capital that comes from the reinsurance industry. So we've got risk capital, household finance, and philanthropy. And now the Indian government has picked up this approach and is using it in their disaster risk financing programs.
Okay.
And so this is where you demonstrate it, you get people comfortable with understanding the benefits of it, and the risks, of course.
Yes.
And so it's a shared approach to try something new.
Right. So it's a combination of social protection from the government side, but also a financing mechanism as well, right?
Exactly.
And I can totally see it scale up. I mean, when you could also incorporate some of the solutions. So let's say your roof is not reflective enough, and adding some of those things could reduce your premium, perhaps.
Yes, and that's a great point, because insurance alone doesn't work. You need to have things that reduce the risk of heat. And so lots of things do that. A roof that is reflective instead of absorbing, like the metal roofs in informal communities. Or shade when you're trading in the market, or a fan, or a tarp that you could put over your crops, or a water tank that gets buried so that your water is protected. So there are all sorts of things that can reduce your risk of financial loss and health loss, and that can, when you reduce your risk, reduce your cost of transferring that risk.
Right. And is this sort of, for a change, I can ask the opposite question. Is this, I mean, you're working in developing countries. Is this something that developed countries could also use, perhaps beyond women? And
of course, and this is what's so interesting, because so much innovation and experimentation and out of necessity is happening in the global south. What we co-created with our partners in India is now going to be tested in Los Angeles. And so there are lots of places where we've tried new things and realized these have application. And if you have not yet been affected by extreme heat, you will be. I mean, this is not... And this might get you to your, yeah, it's coming, and we're not ready. We're not.
So maybe just kind of slightly moving away from the heat aspect completely, if you don't mind. I come from India myself, and I realized that most times, the poorer, more informal settlements happen around rivers and canals that are kind of a risk of kind of, because those are the only places left in cities that they can come and occupy, right? So they are much more vulnerable to sliding and landslides and that side of things. Do you see this kind of approach being taken on to other aspects to this? I mean, it'll be interesting to see how...
Yes, so much innovation.
Because there could be a much more
around.
holistic approach to adaptation and resilience.
Absolutely. And some of this are social and cultural changes we need to make. They're not just structural changes. And when, we think about heat is the driver of so much of this, flood, of course, flash flood and drought and hurricanes. I mean, heat is driving, heat in the atmosphere, heat in the ocean is driving all of this. When you think about what's happening in coastal communities in terms of sea level rise or salinated water supplies, nature-based solutions show so much effectiveness in terms and cost effectiveness, and they have multiple benefits. And I'm sure in your work.
Yeah, we'll be going further into this conversation during our panel, but absolutely agree.
Yes. And so not cutting the mangroves, making sure that the riparian areas are natural. I mean, these are basic things, but they are hard to maintain because of the necessity to use the natural resource in these communities. But yes, taking a multi-hazard lens is really important. Yeah,
I'm just wondering if there was like a mayor, and we'll have a mayor come in later, that says, how can we replicate this elsewhere? How can we, and what can they do? What can MDBs like us, World Bank and others do? What would you say we could do from this?
I think so much of the conversation around investment and the multilateral banks is a look at where are the cash flows and how can we make a sustainable practice of something that can pay back. And whether those cash flows and returns are commercial or market rate or not, we still want money flowing above zero. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't take into account the risks that we see growing.
Right.
And so part of the challenge is that we have to acknowledge the risks, quantify those risks, and cities don't have access equally to quality quantification of risk or value at risk.
Interesting.
And so if you're making investment plans, you need to know what that value at risk is and know where in your city which hazards are going to be the most impactful and costly, and what sort of return, and I should say like in a cost-benefit analysis, if I invest in this, all my bus stops are shaded and cool. If I build a nature-based or a seawall and I prevent coastal flooding, what sort of benefit or cost avoidance would I have? And insurance is a piece of this, but not all of it. And so we haven't quite grasped the brass ring on this, because if you think about it, of course I'm focused on heat, if a garment factory owner sees that the factory floor is hot and knows that the workers are suffering from that heat, they don't currently have a tool that says, if I invest in water stations, changing their hours, changing their uniforms, taking days off for heat, does that increase my productivity? How much?
Yes.
Can I expect the same output from this workforce if I do these things at this cost? That's coming soon.
Right. So essentially, the quantification is critical here, right? So what I'm hearing, actually. So perfect. Just to kind of summarize for myself, I mean, I'm blown away by the fact I was expecting a deep conversation about nature-based solutions and how we need to have more trees and that side of things. But it's really amazing to approach this from a kind of protective side of social protection as the mechanism to deal with it, which is quite of amazing. And also kind of not just looking at it from kind of adaptation as a problem, but looking at it as a systemic way where we can take it from a solution, a systemic approach, and a more equitable approach, which balances it off, right? Could be quite interesting, actually.
Yes, and I think one of the most important things is to make the invisible visible. And so much of the informal economy in these countries and cities they're the economic backbone. I mean, I think we did an analysis and we looked in Tamil Nadu at Chennai, and there are 3 million workers in the domestic and informal economy, and they're driving 45% of the economy.
Right.
And I've got to check the numbers, so don't quote me on the numbers, but you see the rationale is that this incredibly important body of workers who are not terribly well supported and often, moved from places, and you know what I'm talking about, where communities are physically removed from their communities and where they're living and put into other places far away from their community. Displaced. Yes, without a real understanding of the role that they're playing in the economy.
Right.
So I think the social protections are really important.
No, there's so much that we can go into, but thank you very much for sharing.
Oh, are we done?
Your insights. Yeah, I think it's time out for this.
Okay.
Thanks to Katie for this. Thank you very much. We'll have the next panel, guys.
So. Okay.
Yeah, time passed really fast. I shall now invite the next panel in, and this would be moving from heat to a much more design and kind of solutions-based approach. I'm really excited by this. I hope they're going to come. I need to have a secret whistle to get them to come in. There we are. Hey. So I'm really excited because we have a really diverse panel, as you'll see here. We have Coach, who's a consultant, a landscape architect, and she leads a really interesting landscape firm that has done a lot of work in Bangkok, and she will speak a little bit now. And then Isabelle, who is from VINCI, the construction company, and she's a VP there, leading the environmental work there. It'll be really good to understand from an infrastructure heavy kind of thinking through how to solve problems in a concrete way, if I can put it that way, would be interesting. And we have a mayor here who will tell us how wonderfully successful a city can be. I think it's really important not just to kind of have a vision of everything that is going wrong, but kind of seeing what can be done. And Dejan is going to explain how well it's done, and hopefully he will give us some examples of what others can take away. So that's our panel. So maybe start with you, Posh.
Yes.
Yep, but maybe start with, I had asked her to show her work because designers love to kind of, because it's good to visualize what she's done in Bangkok. It's really mind-blowing. And don't forget, Bangkok had one of the worst floods in history.
Yes.
One in 700-year flood.
In 2011. And any one of you have been to Thailand, Bangkok? Yes.
Oh, wow.
Swadika, yes. So this is Bangkok from far. Yes.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And you can see how flat we are. And we are Delta City. And you can see how concrete we are as well. And this is a very, normal, heavy rain days experience. And you can see that this is not only just a city of 15 million people, but it's also other beings and many more. And I think this explains a lot. And then me as a landscape architect, we built the first public park in 30 years. 37 years now. So you can see 15 million people, and this is like the first park in 30 years. Maybe some of you haven't born yet. And how can we survive with this concrete city, urban heat, flooding, and
humidity.
So many more. Humidity and good food.
Good food. And spicy good food.
It's spicy food. So, and of course, I'm not going to show all of my work, but this is like an inclined park. It's not a flat park, it's an inclined park that you can restore rainwater tank, wetland, and at the lower end, the retention pond can double its size. So I want to focus on infrastructure that is not only concrete, but it's also infrastructure that also livable with the people. Yes.
So, the obvious question is, I know many landscape architects who don't do such work. What got you into this? You know, this is
This
kind
is
of
something
leading towards,
I should end up doing a resort or golf course and many other things when people think about landscape architects. But I just want to, not just to be different, but I was experienced was flooding in our history in 2011. So it's actually when the life gets you to the death and survival point of view. I think it's keep me asking myself what kind of landscape architect I should be for my city and for Thai and for this flooding problem. So this park can actually floodable, and
Right.
it's shifting people from the infrastructure that dam or big concrete barrier, and we don't want to get wet. We cannot get wet. We are Delta City, we are water people, but just the urban infrastructure that's shifting us, our understanding that we cannot get wet. So I think that's like a big problems in how we create our city and the way we invest so much money
Right.
on the fear-based infrastructure. Yes.
Really interesting. So, nature-based solution then is not fear-based?
I don't think because when you invest and there's so many money coming from World Bank and ADB and many other banks for us to you can build this big dam, this big whatever heavy infrastructure, or even close our Gulf of Thailand so you don't get wet. But it's actually not the landscape that we are from. And when we invest a lot, and we're talking about resilience, and we using infrastructure to resilience for us.
Right.
But my generation and younger generation cannot swim. How can we fighting flood if the human in that city can't even swim, and we don't want to get wet? So when you invest in nature-based infrastructure, you actually telling people that we need to live with change, we need to live with nature, and nature should be part of us. And this park is floodable. It's not about getting rid of water, but it's about holding or spawn city or giving room and space for water.
Yes. No, I'll come back to you with more thoughts on this, but I think what I took away, and that's really powerful, and actually I can empathize with it, coming from emerging markets myself, that having total resilience doesn't mean the problem just goes away completely, but you learn to, as a human, learn to deal with water shortages and electricity problems and the heat and it's a part of your routine a little bit, and you can learn, it's a coping mechanism and builds personal resilience as much as global resilience, right?
And that's why we are here. We're talking about change.
Yes.
But we're the one who don't want to change at all. I don't think it's the right concept of adaptation.
Yes.
The real adaptation is in humanity. It's not in infrastructure itself.
That's a great point.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks. Isabelle, moving to you now.
Yes.
You work to some extent on the other end of the spectrum. I don't want to make this a big contrast. I'm sure there's no perfectly gray and perfectly green stuff, but maybe bringing this from, as an infrastructure company that builds roads and infrastructure and the dams and the schools and the hospitals as well, what is your perspective in this? How do you see this infrastructure shape cities to deal with what is to come?
Yes, so definitely that's a right question, and that's a story which is both technical but also about change management. So how to make sure that we understand this new paradigm and that climate change is definitely happening, and companies like our company have to bring also solutions. And I'm going to discuss adaptation, but definitely we still have to decrease the emissions and to mitigate all the origin and the source of climate change at the same time. However, when we focus specifically on adaptation, so we decided at VINCI Group to implement solutions and to bring them back or in front of our clients also to say that really solutions exist in terms of design of infrastructures, in terms of living soil or nature, and we have to bring it back also into the discussion to be able to apply and implement the all-round approach or 360 approach, integrating both economy, environment, and social and society together. So if I give you one example, it's going to be on nature in cities, for instance. I joined the VINCI Group 7 years ago, and there was already an existing offer, integrated offer on nature into cities. However, currently, more or less 6 years after, I would say we are finally fully ready to go to the market with that. Why is that? Because we fully understand the key skills and capabilities that we needed to implement to be able to really implement this kind of cooling island into cities. And it's not only about nature, so definitely putting back vegetation and vegetals, that's part of the solutions. But in fact, we have to build on 3 other skill sets. One is what you demonstrated a bit with water management and the water flows. So we need to make sure that water is coming back to the natures indeed, and instead of directing stormwater into the river, well, they need to go definitely into the ground. Second is the ground itself. So at VINCI, indeed, infrastructures. So we are really a specialist of mineral soil. So geotechnical skills and all of that. So it's about knowing, what is a living soil, and that it's not only indeed the mineral capabilities. And the last one just is the pavement of the soil itself. So again, with porosity, for instance, to infiltrate waters. So in fact, when we were talking about natures in cities, thinking about something which is not exactly VINCI infrastructures-driven solutions, we managed to put it in a way that, in fact, 3 of the core skills are really exactly our skill set from the infrastructure provider, and then one is indeed vegetation and nature. And it helps, to have at the same time an incremental change, but also be able to bring this overall and global solution that we bring together. So the complexity is that it works together, and we have to be ahead of the design to be able to implement these kind of solutions.
Isabelle, I think you very well explained how, as a company that works on construction, you can handle a lot of these problems. But there's another side to your company, which is an operator, right? So you bid for these big airports, big, buildings and infrastructure, and you land up owning and managing it, not owning, but at least managing it for the next 30 years. How are you integrating? What happens if you have the floods that we talked about, and you have that infrastructure? As a building owner or a maintainer, how do you explain this and take risks?
So I'd like to say that's a chance to have indeed those 2 legs, that we build infrastructures, but also we operate infrastructures, so mainly in the mobility activities, so airport, highways, railways. And that means that we take contracts for, indeed, like you mentioned, several decades. So we are there to operate, but also maintain and make sure that we expand the life expectancy of this infrastructure. And adaptation is part of what we have to implement. So it's a kind of risk management, definitely. And that's why we needed to integrate adaptation quite, I would say, ahead of the contractual phases from the beginning, to anticipate all the risk and to make sure that we will provide, the right level of design, solution, financing, etc., etc. And that puts us in a position that, because we have to apply it for one leg of VINCI in the concession business, Well, we can provide to some clients, only who are asking us only to build an infrastructure with some return on experience, definitely.
Okay.
So that's really important. However, the key part is that we do not have an obvious economic model for adaptation. So despite the fact that we have many, many reports from macroeconomy, saying that the cost of action is cheaper than the cost of inaction. So it's written several times, it's at least 5 times more, to wait for the damages to come than to invest now. It's not so easy. So we are working, we have a specific working group in our foresight and innovation specific entity, which is called, Leonard, where we work with academics to apply this kind of cost of inaction and action challenge, to some specific buildings, infrastructures, etc.,
Right.
to make sure that we find also a way to sell it from an economic perspective.
And I'll come back to you again, but just for the others to understand. So let's say you're doing, just for simplicity, a road project,
Yeah.
and you need to have drains around it, and the client, the government, has asked you to build, think about 1 in 20-year flood. You could do the economic analysis and say, no, maybe through nature-based sustainable urban drainage or some mechanism, you're able to offer a 1 in 50-year, 1 in 100-year design. Is that sort of the best way to look at this?
So that means that indeed now we have to integrate this kind of risk at the tendering
That's what
process.
needs to come, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
So it was not the case, for the past decades, I would say, but currently, so that's why we have to work, and not only the only company working on the methodology to assess climate change risks. So that means that, again, we working close to academics and some knowledgeable people. There are many here at Chend now, to make sure that we have the right level of assessment. And then once we have that, and we develop a tool internally, which is called Resilience, for instance, for us, our own experts, to be able to make the first level of assessment of the criticity of infrastructures. And then definitely our role is to bring solutions, so
Right.
to decrease this level of criticity. But it's true that in this case, kind of concession business or public-private partnerships, we are taking the risk.
Yes, by
Yes.
pricing it slightly higher, right? Perfect.
And we have to think about using this kind of model based on public-private partnerships also for the existing infrastructures. Because yes, it's
Right.
not easy, but it's something to integrate that for an upcoming infrastructure, a new one to design. And I mean, it for cities specifically. It's another story to come with an infrastructure that already exists, and
Yes.
you need to really invest to make sure it will stay resilient.
Have a question for?
So public partnership, that's part of the game. When I say that, it's not the end of a game, definitely. It's more the beginning, because we need to make sure to match, the financing and the added value of the resiliency of cities and infrastructures.
Thank you, Isabelle. This is a good time for you to come in, Dejan. As a mayor of one of the greenest cities in Europe, perhaps in the world, I mean, I was looking at the numbers. 80% green and open areas. That's literally a city inside a forest, as opposed to, I don't know, Bangkok, where maybe 5% is green and the other way around.
Less.
But I'm sure the city is a lot more than just the green aspect. There's a lot that's been done on the waste side, on the transport side. As a person working in this space and pushing emerging markets, maybe just understanding the journey of the city, how did this happen? Did you wake up from a post-Soviet world into this new green world, or what's the story?
It's a very interesting beginning of the story. I just want to say that, it was something like that, but not post-Sovietian, but Ljubljana was always, I was born in Ljubljana, and it was always, by the way, I am deputy mayor, not a mayor, so that someone can hear and they say, oh, mayors, no, not yet. And Ljubljana was always nice city, but a little bit boring, a little bit gray sometimes, nothing was going on. We were traveling outside for the weekends, escape from Ljubljana. And I will say it was like a sleeping beauty, waiting for the prince to come to kiss her, and she bloomed. So in 2026, our mayor came, and with his program, he kissed Ljubljana, and Ljubljana was blooming. So it was really, we made, as I said, he invited the people from Ljubljana to his office, which was rented before the elections, 2006, and asked them to tell him how they see Ljubljana in 5, 10, 15 years from now. Then we make a list of all suggestions. And then we make a short list of 22 projects. That will be the first one. And also, it was the first time that one mayor, put the date when they will be end of this. So the people can follow and check if this is okay. And after this, we made a vision of Ljubljana of 2007, 2012, when we define all the ways and all the things we want to do, from the kindergarten, streets, water maintaining, brownfields, all the stuff.
Right.
And in that time, we don't even know that there will be a green transition in Europe and something. So we put many things already there. And we just follow the steps one by one, all the security what we have, and all the problems, the obstacle we had. But we try to reduce it and go step after step to follow this. So that's how we gain this. And the first one, which was really a challenge for Ljubljana, was to close the city center for the traffic.
Must have been really hard.
Yeah, that was really. We have a lot of workshops with the citizens around.
Okay.
We have a lot of workshops with the restaurant owner, with the shops owner, with the people who are living there. And also in the end, the mayor himself go to the people who were still opposed, ring the bell and say, sorry, why are you opposing? And then he tried to persuade him that he will be for. And now, after 15, 16 years, there will be no one in Ljubljana who will let the traffic back to the city. So I think you have to have a vision, and you have to have a good team to do all this, to see. We had the best urbanist. This was Professor Kogel. He was an architect and urbanist, professor in the municipality. He was studying France also. So he was really wide opening, and he know how to deal with the city, because we are a historical city, and historical city should be maintained, according to theory, from the city center towards the outside world. And maybe about the flooding, I must say that one of our measure was coming back from the socialist time, because every Slovenian have to learn to swim in 4th grade. So we have some kind of school in the nature for 5 days, and we learned children to swim. So almost every Slovenian know how to swim. That's for the beginning.
You should send them there.
I know. Come to our canals. It's not swimmable at all. It's all sewage right now. So that's a big problem. Yes. Can I ask, like,
Please,
how
please
many, how many population in your city
When you said 50 millions,
Yes.
and I say Slovenia is only 2 million.
Okay.
So Ljubljana is 300,000.
Oh my gosh. that's a good
This is
size.
through night.
Yes.
Through night and through days, 500,000 people, because we have a big commuting to Ljubljana.
No, but I just feel like there's so much beauty in Smallify, and being, you don't need to well develop, like, of course, develop that country. Like for us, seeing many examples from like big city in the West, but why can't we seeing the sample from like a small city from the West as well, rather than consuming and very addictive to get big and bigger. Yes, I think that's
it's I mean, some of this is, as you said earlier, Ashley, that each city has a different DNA, and we need to find a way to deal with it. But I feel like what is interesting is the political and the maneuvering struggles that could be kind of replicated. So in that breath, I have two questions, kind of interrelated. One is that, were you endowed with these benefits already? Did you see any delta from 2006 when you started to now, either in terms of temperature or in terms of economics or in terms of social benefits and then the second follow on, if you could do them together, is what of this can we take to Bangkok or India, for example? What can we take to these models?
Of course, we are doing this delta every year. In 20 years, we made over 2,600 projects. Every year, we have 150 projects, different streets. And though you said that we are very green, but we want more greener. So let's say when we became a green capital of Europe 2016, this is, let's say, the biggest reward in Europe one city can get. We plant 12,000 trees for each of employees in the city government. So we have around 12,000 people working for the city, and for each there was one tree planted. And what you ask, what we have, first I think you have to have a vision. But the second one, with this, what we are performing, or our mayor, he was elected 5 times in a row, more than 60% every time in first round, and we have all the time, we have a majority in the city council. So it's one thing that you can do. If you don't have a majority, it's bigger problem, because you can negotiate with all the others. But now we said we are going this, so this is something that should be made,
Yeah, we need strong leadership, I'm hearing.
Strong leadership and fair leadership. So we are doing for the people. And maybe it's the answer that you ask. Let's say one of our projects, we not close enough the main street through Ljubljana, but we made like a shared space, only for buses, bicycles, and pedestrian. And there is no right who is the first one. Always is one the first one. You have to be watched, but and we reduce the PM particles for 70% in that area with this. That's the measurement you're doing. We are now expanding this in the other part of the city, of course. And this is all come with the politics of transport politics, of traffic politics, or the parking spaces in with public transportation and all this. So all together is coming. All areas must be also the culture. Just this maybe Ljubljana is giving 11% of the budget for the culture. This is without any investment, and we just repaired 2 old factories. One was a sugar factory, one was a bicycle factory, which was really near in the center. At that time, not, but now. But there are now the most beautiful gallery and the gathering objects in a city. And we prolong also the pedestrian path to these 2 facilities. So it's really wide number of activities that you can. It's only come to sustainability.
No, thank you for sharing all that, actually. And in fact, we are out of time in some ways. But I just wanted to also stress that it's not just about, having the greenery and the political capital. There was a lot of infrastructure also done. I remember on my research, I was checking this out, that your food and your waste management system is one of the best in the world. And most of that food goes into composting, and most of that composting goes into growing of the crops and keeping your green fields. So there's a whole feedback loop that takes infrastructure to make it happen. Thank you very much for your lovely comments and sharing your thoughts. Thank you very much. And now, folks, we shall move from 80% green to a city that has 20% green, Paris. And I shall welcome Alex Florentin to come here and share his experience. Alex, for those who don't know, is the next councillor of Paris, and he formed a cross-party alliance, a mission called Paris 50 Degrees. Basically, the idea was to kind of get a focus around what would happen if temperature goes to an extreme amount, and what political actions can be taken. there. So it'll be really interesting to speak to Alex and for him to have a quick presentation beforehand. Welcome. Thanks.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you. I think your slides should be up, so in case you want to share. I just gave a quick introduction to yourself. Happy to have you here. And I don't know if you managed to hear some of these things, but we had some really interesting discussion with the private sector, with the NGOs, with the architects, and a mayor earlier, a deputy mayor earlier, regarding the heating aspect, as well as the other aspects, including flood risk and other aspects of adaptation. As we're based in Paris, would love to hear what you see as problems that might be in the horizon or already there, and how we could potentially deal with it. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. So first of all, how did we get to this idea of 50 degrees? Back in 2017, I was working as a climate change expert, and I got to read a scientific paper which was stating that we could reach 50 degrees by the second half of the century in France. I'll just turn 40 years old in a few days from now, and I thought I might experience these temperatures by the end of my life. And when I got elected in 2020, this number got stuck with me, and I thought, is the city of Paris, where I was born, is it ready for such temperatures? And when we started this transpartisan work, we found out that it was, and it was stated by some other panelists, it's not about climate anymore. It's about, can the city still function in a different climate? And the way we worked was that we did a collective investigation, because the main question with which we entered the topic is that why Paris is so deadly when it comes to heat waves, while we do not have the highest temperatures in Europe. And so Paris became not just a scenario, it became a stress test.
It's particularly prone to heat stress compared to London or Berlin. Is that
Exactly,
okay?
Exactly. Because, and I'm going to show you one slide which shows the temperature, the ground temperature during a heat wave. And we are basically right here, right now, in this event. We are in this red area. In this red area, you can have temperatures at night 6, 8, 10 degrees higher than in the blue areas, which are forests. And because we are among the densest large cities in the world, and Ljubljana is maybe 80% with forest, you mentioned, well,
yes.
For us it's like the contrary, you know?
Yes.
and it's a city with such heritage. I mean, look at this place.
Yes.
It's so old, it's so good looking, but this is a greenhouse. Imagine being here during a heat wave. You could not have such events during a heat wave.
Yes.
And so when the city gets so hot at night, then it complicates everything, whether for human health, because you have less sleep. If you have less sleep, it means trouble for your cognitive development, so that's for kids. Heat also means that your cardiovascular system is really challenged, so that's
particularly
a problem.
for older people, right?
Exactly. So it's not just elderly now, it's also the children, it's
yes.
also a woman in pregnancy. But that's also a challenge for our infrastructures. Everything that runs on electronic, everything that has electricity has a maximum temperature. Air conditioning also have a maximum temperature, around 42, 43 degrees, the ones that are installed in Paris. Mm-hmm. And we are in this area of temperature.
Right.
And it's also a cultural challenge, because unlike other countries, we don't have to go very far, like in Thailand, but also in Spain and in Italy, people are more used to heat, so they know how to behave, inside their house. The architecture is also adapted to hotter climates. That's not the case in Paris.
Yes.
That's why it's so deadly.
It's built for a temperate climate, right? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
So you had this mission. What did you find I mean, it'll be really interesting to know the inside, how do you get a coalition of parties to kind of have a focus? Would love to hear, for the audience sake, how does it work and how did you build that kind of alliance? And then what are the sort of solutions you found for Paris? What is it telling you?
So regarding the alliance, first of all, I choose this topic of heat because heat affects people who vote on the left, on the right, and people who don't vote. It's like it affects everybody. So that's a good topic to build alliances. That's the first thing. The second is that we did not use a lot of scientific projection. The first thing we did is that we investigated. And politicians are usually keen on hearing what the field is saying. So we had somebody working in a restaurant telling us that during heat waves, he experienced temperatures as high as 60 degrees where he was working.
The kitchen and stuff.
In the kitchen, yeah. We had interviews with people living on the last floor where you have 4 times more chances to die during a heat wave with temperatures above 45 degrees. We had people working in the construction business. We had people organizing cultural events like festivals, telling us that they had problems with floods, heavy rains, as well as heat. So when the climate changes, we could show that everything changes, and that was that's not even science-based yet. That's like field-based, and that's how we build this alliance and with people from a different perspective on this. And then it changed the narrative because then people are like, oh, but it means also that my children at school are going to have problems. How am I going to protect the children? It's a here and now problem. It's not like, oh, let's do this for the end of the century or for people living far away.
Yes.
That's a very direct approach.
Yeah.
And when it comes to solution, because that was the second part of,
Yes.
Of your question, I want to emphasize, first of all, with one slide, the political conclusions. We reached the conclusion that we cannot adapt everything because when climate changes, everything changes. We will not have the time, the financial resources, the carbon resources to change everything, to adapt everything. Second point is that we cannot adapt to any level of climate change. That was really clear. Okay, if 50 degrees happens once, maybe our society will be able to deal with it. But if it becomes regular above 45, that's going to be problematic. And all of this leads to the fact that we will have to choose what is essential and how to protect it. Because technically speaking, that's doable. The roof, we can build wooden terrace on top of zinc roof. We can have, of course, nature-based solutions. We could have Virginia creepers flourishing on top of Haussmannian buildings. But then we will have people working with heritage who will say, oh no, let's not do this. We could use churches or parking undergrounds because those places are really cool.
Yes.
We need to use that, but that's a mindset problem. That's not a technical problem per se. We would know how to do this, but we need to bring all together these people and say, okay, this is a here and now problem. How are we going to adapt? And that's something we can do. And then we do perspective. I just want to emphasize that each bubble here is a heat wave. The higher it is, the hotter, the more to the right, the longer it is, and it's in week. In yellow, that's in the past. The white circle is the famous heat wave in France of 2003 that killed 15,000 people in one single event. The darker shades of Bordeaux in the background are the end of the century. That's if we keep on changing climate. And the red dots are the ones you and I will experience for the next 30 years. So we need to prepare for those red bubbles. That's why we had such a strong name as Paris at 50 degrees.
It's a wake-up call, really.
It's a wake-up call, and it's a stress test.
I wanted to pick up that thing about adapting buildings. You know, I think we had Kate talk about adapting, you know, protecting women and building an insurance. We had Coach talk about people and their resilience. But just practically, it's such a beautiful city. I hate to say this, but it's like living in a museum. I live here. I have the honor of living here. And but I can imagine it would be quite tricky for the heritage, but just generally the whole economics of tourism as well depends on these things. How open does society have to get? You know, that's one question. And then, do you see collective actions playing a role? Because I think at a building by building level, yes, you can put an air conditioner. My biggest concern is that it has a feedback loop. Every person that adds conditioner has a double impact of increasing energy use as well as pushing the hot air outside. So it's kind of creates a feedback loop. So any thoughts on that? You know, because I feel like there needs to be something done at a neighborhood level. I think Indy earlier for another talk was talking about how we as a society don't have a mechanism to deal with. We have mechanism to deal with individuals or at a municipal level, but not as a kind of a street or a district. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's particularly true in France, where we rely a lot on the state. We pay a lot of taxes so that the state is going to take care of all these problems. That's not going to be the case when it comes to climate change.
Right.
So we need to use more what's happening in other countries, which is more community-based resilience.
Right.
So we just launched a grassroots movement called Demain 50 degrees, Demain 50 degrés, so tomorrow 50 degrees,
Okay.
to actually build a culture around heat so that people they know how to behave when it comes to major heat waves, what to do at a very, very local level, so that, for example, the shops need to install shutters so that it creates shades at the street level. The building also needs to invest on shutters. You need to learn how to ventilate your own apartment, current ventilation at your building level, at a larger scale also. So it's not just a technical thing, it's very much cultural.
Yes. Even the streets having covered areas like they do in Turkey and places where you have like, you know, kind of maybe in parts of Greece as well, kind of shaded streets. All of that needs community participation. Right?
Exactly, because you need to install it, you need to take care of it. The city is not going to be able to do all of that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Interesting. I mean, to some extent, Paris has gone through a retake. You know, the Haussmannian style, I'm not saying it right, but forgive me, was actually a recreation with a lot of, you know, deliberate effort to change. But perhaps there could be, in a softer, more greener way, there could be a concerted effort to change the city. Do you think?
We definitely need another Haussmannian revolution, definitely. The difference is that we have to do it in a more scarce world.
Right.
So, and if you don't organize scarcity, you're bound to organize conflict.
Right.
So, because cool spaces, they exist, they are not shared. Yet, you know, it's all about sharing. If we share the right amount of resources, society will maintain. You know, and I'm talking about this problem of scarcity because, unlike other countries, we do have a lot of infrastructure. It's a very rich society. Most of our people don't know how to deal with scarcity, and we will have to get back to that. In my opinion.
Yeah, and I think this messaging is really interesting. This we can't adapt everything.
It's a very strong point.
It's a very strong point. I think it came through from Coach's message as well that you can't, you know, I mean, somebody in the previous talk was talking about if the Antarctica melts, we're talking about 50 to 60 meters of water sea level rise. There is no amount of adaptation, nature or gray or green that will help us at that level, right? So we have to be able to deal with some of these things. It sounds like, and kind of cut places where we can actually live with those things as well.
Yes, and I would say also that we have to work with the systems we have not the ones we wished we had, you know, because sometimes we are doing planification like, okay, that for an infinite world, you know, no. This is where we have a lot as ecologists. We have to learn from crisis management areas.
Yes.
You know? I did some trainings with the police. So many things to learn as an environmentalist, you know, because it's like here and now. How do you manage?
Can I ask you a naughty question? The last one, actually.
Yeah, sure.
If you were the next mayor of Paris, what are the 2 or 3 things you would get done that no other person with your insight having done this would do?
So I will, considering that we are in early spring and we might have a major heat wave next summer, I would work on making sure that the places that are already cool, so museums in Paris are cooled down with the energy from the Seine River. I talked about churches or parking lots, or even offices. In Paris, offices have AC, but it's privatized, you know. We need to learn how to share those places.
Great point, actually.
So really, we need to act with the things that already exist. And second of all, I would, because everybody is talking about nature-based solutions in Paris, that's like in the political mindset, I think we need to involve the citizens into maintaining those new green areas, because first of all, we need, it's a financial problem. And also when you put your hands in the ground, in the soil, you know,
Yes.
you actually cultivate
The relationship.
The relationship.
Yeah, and invest in the city in a sense, right?
Exactly. And last but not least, and this is a saying from England, I would say, hope for the best, plan for the worst. I'm really living by that sentence, and because 50 degrees is not just a theoretical scenario, it's not fiction. This is going to be a stress test for any organization, any territory, even in Western Europe, okay? And if you want to keep having this conversation, I'll be happy to join.
Sure, no, perfect. Thank you so much, Alex, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Give a round of applause to Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks. So maybe some final words, actually. So cities are preparing, as you can see, you know, here and there, and they're trying to manage to deal with climate change as well. There are solutions. I mean, we didn't go deep into solutions here, but what I found really interesting, because I sit in a lot of technical solutions meeting, is that there are sort of political ideas, there are insurance ideas, there are kind of bringing society to be closer to the you know, kind of the real problems idea, right? But I think fundamentally, we have to deal with mitigation. There's no way out of this, is my personal feeling as well. The best adaptation is dealing with mitigation, right? But having said that, particularly for the poorer people in any place, poorer people in rich places and poorer places in poor places, they don't have a choice, and they're struggling right now, and we have to find a solution to help them out whilst we fix the engine for mitigation. So we need to find scalable ideas, like what Katie was talking about, insurance and getting them out of jail in a sense, in terms of getting them a little bit of respite there. I also heard measurement is important. I don't think it came through, but I was thinking about this, you know. You have a nature-based solution there, and a tree here, and a little bit of pond there. How much of a difference is all of this going to make? It's a question I ask as a technical person, and I feel like we need better modeling and better capacity to say, within reasonable bounds, this is the difference it makes, and to be able to put gray and green solutions together and see what really a city should be investing in, rather than just doing it because it's green. You know, just because you can get rid of some car parks and put some green area, fine, but is it making a difference? You know, that's kind of in my mind. And I think the time is there to move forward. I think we all are dealing with it in our own ways. You know, I'm sure we all have our stories to tell in these things. And I think I saw this really interesting kind of cascade. You know, they were talking about cities that are dealing with it, cities that are adapting to it, and cities that are transforming through it, right? And I think the opportunity here is not to kind of silo this into adaptation or resilience and thinking through in a much more cathartic way. I don't know, it's sort of thinking through as a transformational aspect where we can have a low carbon society that can have the greenery like the city we saw earlier, but also have our poorer communities have an inclusive mindset there to somehow bring it all together is what I think is the way forward into this space. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Thank you very much for your time.